Texas, this basically is Texas in the Civil War. And of course my tripod. Okay guys, in the years building up to the Civil War, as you can guess, Texas, because a lot of the people that came here were immigrants from the Old South. As tensions continued to mount and increase, more and more Texans became paranoid about states' rights and protection of slavery. Like I told you, with the population, most of the Texans were migrants from the Old South. Even though we did have a lot of people from foreign countries, most particularly Germany, that came here. And the Germans who lived in the hill country and had pretty much no use for slavery voted not to cede. But then in 1857, John Brown's raid at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, where John Brown and others assaulted a federal arsenal to get munitions to what they believed was going to be a slave uprising that never occurred. Scared the Willikers out of many of the South, including down here in Texas. This is when you have the Democratic Party that was a majority in Texas. They, just like Stephen Douglas, their candidate, supported popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty is simply the belief that, hey, you let the states decide. It's a state issue, not a national issue. Well, what about the Republican Party? Well, guys, there was no Republican Party in Texas. They did not get this far south. And rather than have a Republican Party, you had guys like Sam Houston and Throckmorton that formed the Constitutional Unionist Party. That basically they pledged allegiance to the Union and to the Constitution. But of course, as things continue to mount, there's more and more hysteria, especially as there's a lot of fires that start in cities all across North Texas. I mean, these are mysterious fires. They're all city public buildings that get burned down. And people start thinking, oh my gosh, this is the beginning of what's going to be lead to a slave revolt. You have a secret order known as the Knights of the Golden Circle that came to Texas in 1860, and it had soon established a number of local lodges or tassels. The plan of this organization seems to be, it's still kind of unclear, but they wanted to make slavery more secure in the South. Even trying to go in and invade Mexico to incorporate more slave states into the Union. And there actually were two poorly organized filibuster movements that went down and attacked Mexico in 1860, but they never really did anything or amounted to much. And nationally, when the voters chose Abraham Lincoln in the election of 1860, it didn't happen here in Texas because he wasn't even in the ballot. $115,463 Texans voted for Bell, and 4,518 voted for Breckinridge. Breckinridge basically was the political candidate that cried for more federal protection for slavery in the South and a lot of the Deep South voted for him. Well, of course, Houston is our governor during this time. And he said, Mr. Lincoln has been constitutionally elected, and as much as I appreciate his success, no alternative is left to me but to yield to the Constitution. In other words, I'm going to support the Constitution. We're going to stay in the Union. Meanwhile, while he's doing this, and he's trying to be level-headed, you have these radicals that are growing in strength and kicking up the populace. You have like the Navarro Express that said the North has gone overwhelmingly for Negro equality and Southern vassalage. Southern men, will you submit to this degradation? So in a kind of extra legal meeting on December 2nd, they called for delegates to come to Austin, 2 delegates from each county, and on January 8th, we were going to cast a vote to see if we were going to cede from the Union. And the guy who was in charge of this was Oren Roberts, this guy was born in South Carolina, moved to Texas later on, was a lawyer, he was a professor at UT, he was governor of Texas. Then towards the end of his career, he was a professor of law at UT Austin. And I believe in the 1920s, when there's a resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan in America, he wrote an article for the Texas State Historical Association, the Southwestern Journal, that was surprisingly, and modernized, that laid praise on the Klan. Good old Oren Roberts. And they put on a huge media blitz. Sending out more than, where is it? Sending out more than 20,000 copies of a pamphlet called Declaration of Causes as to why Texas should separate from the Union. On February 23rd, they take a vote. 46,129 want to get out of the Union. 14,697 want to stay. So we're the 8th state that joins the Confederacy. As you can see here, these counties in red, for the main part, these especially were largely German, voted against the secession. On March 2nd, even though we proclaimed we're going to be join the Confederacy, on March 2nd, it was organized and the officers of state were asked to take a pledge to the Confederacy. And Houston, rather than taking that oath, he stayed in the basement of the Capitol building, whittling. So he was removed as governor, and he would later, while the Civil War was still going on, he would die in Huntsville. But to give y'all a view as to what Texas did in the military, I'm going to play you a part of Dr. Rick McCaslin. This guy was one of my professors at UNT. He also chaired the discussion a presentation that I had at the Texas State Historical Association. He also wrote a book called The Great Hanging that happened during the Civil War, when a group of people that did not want to be in the Confederacy and were just heading up north were rounded up by the other people of the town and hung. And same thing happened to a group of Germans down in the south who